Welcome back to my Thracia 776 Ironman. This is Chapter 2 Gaiden, which, if you played this and played it blind, this would have been a very rude awakening for you when you were introduced to Thracia's unique Fog of War mechanic. If you have at least any knowledge of Japanese and can read this at a high enough level as it's going by, try and pay attention to this little dialogue between Lifis and Safi. Because I'm going to bring up a future exchange in a few minutes as part of my roughly once per video minor Japanese lesson. This chapter can feel kind of nasty, blind, but if you're very familiar with it already and you know what to expect, you realize just kind of how puny this chapter is and how it's actually a pretty gentle introduction. Mainly, some of the issues that arise with it are just people don't trust enough in Avil and Dagdar, and that could be said of if anybody has any issues at all in these first 4 chapters, not up through chapter 4, but chapters 1 to 3, 2x inclusive. There is a little dialogue between Avil and Leaf that you can trigger that I don't believe I triggered this time, even though I'm trying to go through most of the story beats and optional dialogues that I can, just in case anything catches my eye to speak about. But a lot of this mission is sand, and that's pretty annoying, especially for Finn. He can get kind of far behind, but you can do some funny tricks to get different people ahead, especially using characters that aren't super useful in this map, like Marty can be used for those kinds of maneuvers, although maybe not so much on turn 1 here, since his starting position's kind of far back. And you know, I don't think, thinking of it, because I'm a few chapters ahead of what you're seeing here, I don't think Marty got a single point of experience during this whole time, pre-Manster. And usually I get in like an axe hit with him somewhere, but poor Marty. I'll try and get you back into the mix later. But how I usually approach this is just sending Dagdar off to the right. I've done that pretty much every time. Sometimes I send Avil with him, but that's kind of overkill. It depends on if you want to capture some of the stronger enemies here, which can be good because they do actually have some fairly strong weaponry for this point in the game. Some of it you can't really use all that well, except on, like, Dagdar, for example. And he leaves for a while, so you see here, if you get Finn mounted here, he's pretty good for the rest of the mission. Otherwise he has trouble contributing where you really need him, which is far over to the right. You can pretty much trivialize this mission if you just send everybody in one direction, probably to the right, because there's not much going on to the left, except for maybe like a few brigands and a fort where I think you can find one of the torches. There's another torch toward the center of the map where there are no enemies. And by center of the map, I mean like center of this particular island here. If you're not familiar with the map, then you won't really know what I'm talking about yet, but you'll see. I didn't use any torches during this run because I have this map pretty much memorized, but if you use a torch here, it makes this map a lot more breathable. If you have any anxiety, you would definitely want to rush for these forts. Like, you can see a fort below Dagdar right now, and one of those 2 forts that's there has a torch. So if you grab that and then pop it, it reveals quite a bit of the map. But the most danger is off to the right, and it might not reveal that there. So here's the dialogue that I'm talking about here. When I was briefly discussing it in the beginning of the video, depending on your translation, if you've played any of the translation patches out there, there's actually a line here by Liffis that is either cut or it's kind of toned down a little bit, maybe intentionally, maybe not. I can't really speak for those translators. One of the translations in particular, it's not wrong, but the way that Liffis talks about Safi to his little underling, and also later on when he's just kind of musing to himself, the language in Japanese is kind of less flattering. It's not the kind of language that, you know, is like especially disgusting. Like, it could be worse, but it's also a little bit more eyebrow raising and maybe offensive is not the right word, but it's sort of getting close to that. I'll include some of that relevant text down in the description of the video, even though it's on screen. I didn't skip it or anything, but if you have trouble reading the font or you just can't read all that quickly, I'll put it down there. And you know, you can use like browser plugins to help you read it, or you can, you know, look up the words by just copying and pasting into the search engine of your choice. And I'll try to do that in the future when I have some Japanese to bring up that isn't just like the title of the map or anything like that, because that's already in the video's title by default. So aside from Dagda or Dagdar, you're gonna keep hearing me switch between those two names, because I try, when I'm discussing Fire Emblem with other English speakers, which are the majority of the fans that I interact with of the series, I try to use the commonly accepted English names, but I may also, while I'm looking at the screen here, just read the Japanese names off and say it like it is. Like, Dagdar is actually Dagda. If he had that, I'm going to say this in like more layman's terms. If you saw like a line, like a straight line, stretching after the last character in his name, then you could make more of an argument that it was Dagdar. And it's not exactly wrong. I think even the like official Heroes translations or whatever use like have the R at the end. So that's really minor, but I only bring it up to explain why I will waffle back and forth sometimes. Not that that's important, but all in all, this isn't as eventful of a chapter. Maybe a little bit more so than the last two. It's more interesting. There's more going on that's new mechanically and things like that. So this warrior that just ran up near Dagda is one of those enemies that I sometimes try to capture, and if you have Avil nearby, she can either make it easier or more difficult, depending on the weapon that you put in her hands. Like, if you put a regular iron sword in her hands, sometimes she won't kill stuff, especially bulky units like that warrior. The iron blade that she comes with, she will probably kill him. She'll either crit or like adept, and the heft of the iron blade will be enough to kill even a promoted unit. But I find that sometimes with just a regular iron sword, if she crits, it won't necessarily kill a promoted unit. But if you're going like full charge with Dagda, he may not always have backup with him in the form of like Finn and Leaf and any other characters that you might want to send down there. I always kind of just like flip a coin in my mind as to which of the units like Tanya, Ashian, Halvin, Marty, Ronan, I send whichever way. Like sometimes I send both archers to the left, Sometimes I send one of the fighters to the right. It's just kind of however I'm feeling at the moment. And it really doesn't matter. As long as you don't send, like, Tanya alone to the left or something, it's fine. And if I had selected the right fort with Avil, first off, then she'd probably be able to catch up to the others and help out as a failsafe. Because she usually gets like a movement star at some point, and she has the most move just about out of anybody. I think she's like tied with Finn pretty much, but even more so on this map because of the terrain. But while you're completing the main objective, whoever you send to the left can kind of just like soak up experience, because those guys probably won't hit you too much, especially if you pair support partners like Ashian and Tanya, which gives them extra hit and avoid. And like you can milk that archer there if you want by just, you know, equipping like an iron axe on somebody or whatever. I don't think it's really worth micromanaging, but for me it tends to just happen naturally. I always try to like send somebody to stand on the fort without actually seeing it, and like this time, for example, I chose wrong, and then that bandit took the fort, so that was kind of unfortunate. But luckily with the Pooji, Ashian is pretty much guaranteed to crit, especially standing next to Tanya. I don't think he needs to, but I find that Ashian has some nasty Pooji misses if he doesn't have either a support partner or like any of the other skills that grant hit and avoid, which we don't really have yet, but we will pretty soon. So now the main force is getting up into where truly this can get dangerous if you decide at this point, oh, okay, I'm gonna like send Leaf ahead or send Ronan ahead, because right up and to the right of Finn and Dagda, there's at least like 3 or 4 enemies that, depending on the exact square you plant yourself down in, potentially all of them can attack, and those aren't like especially strong enemies. Like they're not any stronger than those weaklings that Tanya, Ashian, and Halvin are fighting. But you know, especially with 1% hit floor, you never know what's going to happen, and you may even see somebody in this run die just because they got hit by every potential enemy. That would just be awful. But I did kind of throw caution to the wind here by throwing Ronan a little bit farther ahead. He does get supported by Leaf. I don't think I mentioned yet that Leaf supports the most people in the game. Among units we have now, he supports Finn. He supports Ronan. I still didn't double check on whether or not he supports Avil. I think he might. Not that you would ever notice the difference here, because Avil just kills everything. He doesn't support any of the Axe guys, or Tanya, I know that for sure. But apart from those 2 or 3, he supports like a full, like 16 people, I think. So generally, it's just good to have Leaf in the mix, no matter what. Even if you are playing blind or you don't remember who supports who, it's just a safe bet to put Leaf next to whomever's on the front line, and chances are he's going to give them a bonus. With that said, a lot of those units that he supports are kind of bad. There are a lot of fan favorites, but there are also units that are good, but they're not the kind of unit that really benefits from having that kind of support. The added avoid may save their lives, but like, for example, some of the healers get supported by Leaf, and this is one of those games where healers just cannot take a hit unless it's against other magic users. One other thing I don't think I mentioned is that magic and resistance are the same stat in this game. So that's why it's not just worthless that Ronin grows magic and has like a base magic stat. So that if you leave him in range of a mage that you wouldn't normally leave like a random archer in range of, chances are that he'll survive it. I think in a little bit I tried to put Marty a little down and to the right of where he is right now, because if you play not even at that slow of a pace, bandits will eventually come from the seas to the south of where he and Dagda are, and you can get a little bit of an experience that way. And I didn't think I was playing that fast, honestly, so I thought for sure, especially because I took my time a little on the bridge coming up ahead. But watching this video now, I do realize that this was quicker than I thought it was. I think in the last video I said the videos were going to get longer, and I think this video may actually be a little bit shorter, or around the same length. And I can hear the triumphant victory music, which plays when there's only like a couple enemies left and you haven't lost anybody. Although something that's kind of funny that can happen in this game is so if you lose a unit, if you get a unit killed, it'll play this really dire music to let you know that you screwed up, more or less. And it's not like sad music, it's more like, oh crap, one of our guys died. We're fearing for our own lives now. That's the kind of tone. But strangely, sometimes this music doesn't play, and it always feels like an insult. It's like, I always imagine that the army is just like, oh, that guy died? Oh, well, whatever. And like, then the victory music will start playing, and I'll just be like, wow, that's really disrespectful to that unit. I don't know if it's for specific units, or if like specific maps just don't have that trigger for some reason. It probably is not intentional, and I'm probably reading too much into it. I love that crit animation, Fins, or I guess it's probably just like the Lance Knight / Duke Knight animation, but I love when he twirls that lance. It always feels good. Once you start putting your units to around this point on the map, not where I'm moving right now with all the other guys, but up at the top where the front-facing force is, you start attracting like the last aggressive units. The boss doesn't move, he's on a fort, and there's another unit there, and he doesn't move either. He looks dangerous, but he's completely docile. I was really enjoying the hammer during this run, wasn't I? Sometimes, like, you know, at this point I've resigned myself to the fact that, like, Tanya and all of those guys aren't really worth moving, but a lot of times what I like to do is just move everybody anyway, and I like to use the R button in pretty much all Fire Emblems to select next units, and I don't necessarily move whatever unit it falls on, but I might cursor over a little bit after hitting R and then just keep using R to cycle through units. Number one, I think it's a good practice just because you can miss units. And in an upcoming chapter, it's actually especially important because you can kind of forget about those units and not move them, and that puts them in real danger, or like one of them in real danger. And number two, Thracia has this mechanic in place, and this is a vanilla mechanic, where once all of your units are moved, if you press R, it'll bring you right to the end turn button. And, you know, it's like modern Fire Emblems have a smarter mechanic where when you can't move anymore, it'll just automatically end your turn. But you know, for its time here, this is a good mechanic, and I prefer to rest easy knowing that I've moved everybody. Finn is a good candidate to feed these promoted enemies to, even though he kind of got just like a crappy level up there. I mean, honestly, you could feed pretty much every kill to Finn in these early chapters, and I wouldn't try and stop you. I guess like Leaf, you do want to get him some experience, and depending on which axe guy you like, I suppose you can give them some experience. Although there are some chapters like right after the whole Manster arc where units like Ashian and Halfin, you almost have like no choice sort of but to deploy them, and I'll sort of explain why once we get to that first post-Manster chapter. And they actually need to recruit a unit. I mean, you only need one of them, but I usually end up deploying both of them. And it's just, you can get a ton of experience for them there, so it's not really like super dire for them. And so that is Chapter 2 Gaiden. Not too bad of a chapter once you scout it out a little bit and gather up some confidence. One thing I didn't mention while it was going on, but I'm sure you saw it, is that the boss of this chapter, Lifis, he is considered the boss, like the guy on the throne in this, even though he doesn't have a weapon. The object of this is to capture him and just hold on to him, and he's the first boss where you have to do that in order to, I mean, you don't have to, you can either kill him or release him, but then you don't get him, and you definitely want him for reasons you're going to see in a little bit. When in doubt, it's good to hang on to bosses like that, especially if they have like that kind of, you know, when you look at a character and they have that kind of like anime hero look, sort of, you definitely want to hold on to them in this game. And although Lifis does kind of look a little bit slimy, so maybe you wouldn't think that naturally. But anyway. Again, pay a little bit of attention to what Lifis says at the end here when he's just kind of musing to himself, and I'll put that in the description. And that's pretty much it. I will see you in Chapter 3.